Hi, everyone. So we are talking about planning today, planning. Now, I know you've had quite an introduction to planning earlier when we were doing our SWOT analysis investigation, but I'm turning to planning now as actually in like two different capacities because library administrators need to know about planning in these two different capacities, not only as a strategic plan, because first there is the citywide plan coordinated through the planning department or the jurisdictions department that directs so much of what local governments and counties and public realms control in terms of growth, development, and future operation. And then there's the basic planning activity that is the integral part of the duties of any manager in developing the strategic direction of his or her unit or department. So I'd like to investigate both of these facets in a little, in some fashion, because as library administrators, you will be involved in both in some way or another. Um, First, let's look at why organizations such as libraries in cities and counties, et cetera, need to plan. Um, I point you to Abraham Lincoln, who once said, the best way to predict your future is to create it. Obviously, the President Lincoln understood the need for planning in order to reach one's goals. In much the same fashion, communities and local government organizations such as libraries need goals and standards that will drive future development in a direction that is appropriate and that makes sense to the overall mission and objectives of the umbrella organization. Planning helps establish these goals, providing a very good mechanism for helping leaders create the future that they want. And it should help library administrators and leaders develop the character of the city. In general, though, city governments and governments in general need to plan for its future for three different reasons. First, planning saves money. A good plan will help determine the infrastructure the city should have, including considering things such as what roads and highways and bridges and public transportation and sewage systems and facilities should be available. For many citizens, infrastructure is what determines whether the community is a good place to live or a bad place to live. So making the infrastructure work or showing that you are planning for it can attract businesses and taxpayers and investors. Determining what the infrastructure will be in the future can also save an operational and service costs by promoting efficiency and avoiding duplication and setting appropriate sizes for buildings and facilities as well. Planning helps create a future and sense of community. Most jurisdictions have a unique identity, a charm, or a character that is often tied to the architecture and environmental aesthetic of the community. So planning can ensure that these elements are incorporated into all of the cities or communities' projects and buildings and public facilities. The art of planning also helps to establish a sense of place, the features and characteristics that define that unique identity of each community. And planning will help protect the community, determining how and when and where, and the way in which places are constructed and renovated and maintained. Um, Plans protect the environment and set aside green space and open spaces and parks that are restricted from development. And it helps provide citizens with opportunities to improve their health by increasing one's ability to access and participate in physical activities or recreational activities around the jurisdiction, all the while reducing one's exposure to environmental dangers and health hazards. So at the same time, home and property values increase when communities plan for parks and playgrounds and transportation and all those other amenities. So that is helpful to planners as well. Before any development of land or services or facilities can be built in a community, one has to obtain the permission of cities planners. It's definitely required. So cities and towns and jurisdictions in the public world have created a vast number of laws and ordinances that help control the way a community grows. These laws form the core against which planning and planners can approve or deny applications for development. The city planners consider how any proposed development will impact the community, and they then set out to verify that those plans fit within the parameters set forth in existing documents. The largest and most important planning project a local government jurisdiction can undertake is called a general plan. Look to see if your library, or your city, or your jurisdiction has something called a general plan. It's sometimes called a comprehensive plan or an urban plan or even a master plan. This document, after it's adopted by vote of the community and its elected officials, is the community's official statement of policies that will dictate the way it intends to move forward and develop. Some public administrators consider the general plan to be a blueprint, if you will, for um, community development. It it utilizes all the community's values and mission and objectives and determines future community needs and growth. Just as a home or some other building cannot be constructed without architectural blueprints, a city or a community can't be built without having a general plan that will specify, like a blueprint does, what building standards or missions or objectives should be involved in the decision making. The public process or the public policy is critical because it is a public policy. As a public policy, it has to be approved by the public and enforced by administrators in the public realm. So the general plan will really affect everyone in every place within the community. Uh, no other public document that I know of controls so much about what can and cannot be done in terms of developing and land use in a city. That's why I think it's important for you to understand if your library has a general plan and that you become familiar with it. When making decisions about the quality of life in a community, the elected officials, the city personnel, and the staff members, in most cases, are legally bound to the policies that are set forth in the city's general plan. How might the library be affected by the general plan, other than what I've already said? Well, suppose the library's service area has grown so large that one branch or one facility is no longer adequate to provide services to the entire community. One general plan would have predicted the need for additional services and should hopefully have provided for future construction of library facilities in that community. Furthermore, I think the general plan will likely have dictated precise areas or precise locations within the community where libraries or additional facilities might be best served. Because the general plan designs the services and types of neighborhoods and types of businesses that can exist in a city, as well as where those can be located geographically, it does provide an answer to why can't the library be located there? As the community changes and the need for amending certain general plan becomes inevitable, library leaders can be called on to help shape the content of general plans. So, therefore, bringing the public library perspective and the public library expertise and vision will help long range effects on future library service. Um, Talking about the different types of strategic plans, because now we're going to turn into the strategic element that we might already be familiar with. Um, we've sort of discussed the role of planning in its core role of operational management. Um, we turn now to the more strategic role. Public library leaders should use a continual planning process to improve library services and envision their library's role in the community. At its roots, planning acts as an effective decision-making tool for us. Library administrators need to really make decisions about what resources and services and facilities will need to be a part of any short or long-term goals. They need to decide what future library users will want and what they will need and what they will demand. And they need to ensure that their library service, remains relevant and useful in that community. So what resources will be available in the future, and how must those resources be allocated? Not sure. So that's why we need to strategically plan for that. How might the organization's goals and objectives change, and how can the library situate itself to ensure that goals are met in the most effective way? Um, long versus short range plans. Many administrators and library leaders tend to group their planning processes into these two portions, long and short range. In essence, the two can be considered part of the same package. Obviously, your two sets of goals would not be different, but the short range plan might be thought of as maybe an incremental step or used in helping you meet your longer range plans. The strategic plan is known as a long range plan. It attempts to create a vision of what the library's future will look like 10 years from now, 20 years into the future. For most practical purposes, short range goals focus on the more immediate time frame, from the most current year perhaps to maybe 1 or 2 years further down the road. Library administrators have a much more solid grasp on what their current situation is and what is likely to be next year. Therefore, short range plans are often easier to prepare. However, don't ignore that the goal of any short range or even any long term plan should be to direct your future operations. So, continuing to incorporate and dovetail your short range plans into longer range plans is certainly advisable. There are many parts to the strategic planning process. The first is the environmental scan. Before any library manager or leader can concentrate on where they want to go, they have to first understand where they are, right? So organizations use a process called environmental scanning, and this helps them delineate and define their professional and physical environment. An environmental scan helps library administrators and library staff answer the question, what's currently happening in my environment that has the potential to affect our library's future? So an environmental scan provides the library with answers to where we are and how did we get here. It also helps us know where we're going and how will we get there. The answers to these questions provide, of course, strategic direction the rest of the plan will take. After you do an environmental scan, the library should have identified the issues and trends that have important implications for the future success of the library. This scan will do more than just identify issues and trends. It also analyzes and prioritizes them, providing clues as to decision making necessary later on down the road. Obviously, the environmental scan has some extremely large implications for how successful any strategic plan will be. So it must take a priority before any planning gets started. We do the environmental scan first. And that's just gathering data. You could include a community needs assessment, community resource allocations. What's happening out there is a question that we're asking, and how is it going to affect the library? And so to illustrate that point, we need to gather data. Let's assume that you need to go to a job interview across town. Because you can't be late to your interview, you need to be on time, right? So, however, you know that your car is in the shop, so you'll have to take the bus. And you do not normally take the bus, so you get on the internet, you research bus schedules and bus routes. And in doing your research, you identify that the route you need to take is currently undergoing some construction and is being rerouted. Um, so the alternate route will get you close to where you want to go, but will require you to walk a short distance to get to that address. You decide to allow yourself some extra time then to walk to your interview, taking that alternate route. But before stepping out, you also check the local weather and you note that rain is in the forecast, so you therefore grab your umbrella. So that way you will arrive at your interview not in a soaking mess. the The research you've done can be considered a form of an environmental scan. You've used your data to help you make decisions that will affect the rest of your day, and that's what we're looking to doing with this environmental scan. Next, we look at the frame in which your strategic plan will exist. Just as in doing a jigsaw puzzle, most people will normally construct the outer frame of the puzzle and use a box from which the puzzle came in to look at the picture of what the completed picture computer puzzle will look like. You need a strategic frame to build your strategic plan. And this would be the vision, the mission, and the values of your organizations. So seek out what your library's vision is. This vision is a statement that tells the world just what your organization wants to become. You'll obviously also have a mission, and your mission is usually written in any library literature about the organization itself. Uh, the mission, as opposed to the vision statement, is grounded in what you currently do, whereas the vision statement is a call to action and an action that will direct you toward where your organization will be in the future. To put it more simply, I guess the mission statement spells out the things you do best right now, every day, whereas the vision looks to the future in a way you wish to be. And then there are the values. As a library leader or manager, it's important to let your citizens know what your core beliefs are and what your principles are as an organization. So these must be spelled out as well. Words such as teamwork and integrity and respect and accessibility will commonly be used in library value statements. So check to make sure that you have value statements, a vision, and a mission, and those will help your framework. And then, of course, you are on to the SWOT analysis. I certainly won't belabor this anymore since we discuss it heavily in weeks 4 and 5. So let's think about, how do we put a strategic plan in action? So you got all this pertinent data, and you got your strategic framework, you've identified your internal and external factors, and all the potentials for opportunities and threats that it will impact your organization. How do you put it into action? you, of course, design an action plan. Um, an action plan is something that basically spells out assigning a time frame and a timeline and making persons responsible for seeing that certain goals and objectives are achieved. So it's important that any action plan have a timeline and a responsibility or accountability feature on it as well. That will ensure that these strategic plans don't sit on a shelf and gather dust. If they have a time frame and some accountability feature, they are far more assured to being implemented. Um, I also wanted to speak a little bit about evaluation and measurement. So, with the goals and the objectives that you've determined and the timeline in place, and you've assigned specific jobs to specific individuals and made them accountable within the organization with that action plan, um, you're ready then to look to the next plan and measure it within the body of the action plan. It's a good practice to create a monitoring tool or to want something that will help track the library organization's progress toward its goals. Many libraries make a monthly report to communicate to its audience, its citizens, its staff members, whether goals and objectives have been achieved or if they will likely be achieved within the time frame specified. Sometimes I've seen organizations note that the time frame specified to complete a certain goal needs to be amended because of an unforeseen problem or unforeseen challenge. Additional funding and additional equipment or resources might be necessary to achieve a certain goal. Objectives may be revised or new ones added to factor in some new information that the library has obtained. So library leaders will therefore soon learn that strategic plans need constant attention and massaging and um, commitment in order to be successful. So that's the sort of introduction that I wanted to give to you in terms of planning. My biggest takeaway here would be for you to go look for your library or your cities or your university's general plan or master plan and see where the library features in and factors in on that. If you have any questions, let me know. We have a couple of interesting discussions and scenarios to work through here in an assignment. So let me know if you have any questions, everyone. And again, thanks for listening. Bye-bye.